Finding time to think about an academic research career when continuing with a busy clinical schedule is challenging. The NIHR Biomedical Research Centre has committed funds to supporting one-year fellowships that provide opportunities for trainees to generate data and prepare a competitive research fellowship application for external funding. This funding includes 1 year of salary, as well as funding for laboratory or research consumables and travel to conferences. Joining me today are two of our BRC Clinical Training Fellows, Lucy Durham and Natasha Hazelgrave. Lucy, you're a Cambridge undergrad. You did some clinical training at UCL and then did your core medical training. What attracted you to this programme here at the BRC?
Well, I've always been interested in combining clinical work with research, but hadn't had any first-hand experience in the lab. So I thought that this fellowship would be the opportunity to have a year of lab research, which would help me decide if I'm any good at it and also if I enjoy it, and hopefully generate some data so that I can have the perspective to apply for a PhD fellowship.
In the future?
In the future.
And I understand that you were still undecided about clinical specialties, so there was an interest, I think, in dermatology and also rheumatology. So tell us a little bit about the theme of your project.
So my project is looking at psoriatic arthritis, which is a disease that affects the skin and the joints. So it was a good way of combining both of my potential clinical interests in one project.
And how did you find out more about the project before you started?
I emailed Leonie, who's my supervisor in the lab, and arranged to meet her for a discussion about the project. And she answered all my questions and took me on a tour of the lab and gave me the opportunity to meet the other members in the lab so I could have an informal chat about how it was to work in that particular department.
And the laboratory skills that you've picked up since you started?
Quite a lot. So this time last year I hadn't even held a pipette, I don't think, so it was a steep learning curve. The main focus of my project is isolating immune cells from the skin, the joint and also the blood from patients and healthy volunteers. And then we culture the cells and then see what proteins they make. We do that using ELISAs and also flow cytometry.
And the idea specifically is to try and define what about psoriatic arthritis?
Well, there's been a lot of research interest currently at the role of IL-17, which is a protein that your immune cells make, and its role in psoriatic arthritis. And there are some new drugs available that block IL-17 that are currently undergoing clinical trials, and the results have been very promising. And the aim of my project is to understand which cells of the immune system are responsible, the main source of IL-17 in this particular disease.
So what aspect of the fellowship do you think puts you in a good position to apply for funding in the future?
I've generated some preliminary data. I've also got a much better perspective of what research involves and how to structure a project and design experiments to answer specific questions. I've also had the opportunity to write 2 reviews over the course of this year, and I'm currently with my colleagues generating some data, hopefully to go forward into a paper. So this makes me more competitive, I think, when I go through the application.
Very good. So Natasha, you're a few steps ahead. Tell us about how the Clinical Training Fellowship helped you get to where you are now.
So I was an academic clinical fellow when I first started my obstetric training. So I had a small amount of time each year to be devoted to research. And while that was really useful, it allowed me to pursue lots of different projects to decide what I wanted to do and find out about different methods of research, whether I even liked lab work, whether I wanted to do more epidemiological work. But by the end of it, I wasn't quite in a position to apply for a fellowship PhD funding. And so the BRC fellowship gave me a year's devoted time, including not only my salary but consumables, in order to pursue the premature birth project, which I'm now doing. And so I generated pilot data. I was able to work on the fellowship application and hone my lab skills and my statistical skills during that year to put me in really strong position to apply for the NIHR doctoral research fellowship, which I was lucky enough to receive.
And I think you got some support and interview practice beforehand, didn't you?
Absolutely. So the BRC were incredibly supportive of my future fellowship funding. So had a number of practice interviews, were able to talk through career pathways with them and have access to some of their facilities to be able to pursue what we were doing.
So tell us a little bit about the research project.
So my interest is premature birth and why women go into premature labour, and whether we can predict it and indeed prevent it. And there's quite a body of evidence that's implicating the innate immune system into why women give birth early. And we're looking at a particular marker, a natural antimicrobial peptide, which we believe is raised in the vaginal fluid of women who are destined to give birth early. And so we are recruiting a large cohort of women at risk of preterm birth by virtue of their previous history. And we have creating a biobank of vaginal samples as well as blood samples and microbiology samples to be able to examine them and not only look to see if this marker is predictive in preterm birth, but look at the mechanisms behind it.
Now, your stimulating research environment has allowed you to get involved in some other studies too. Tell us very briefly about those.
So my other interest is public health, and in particular women's global public health. And so when I started the department, I was lucky to get involved in a project looking at why women in low-resource countries die from preeclampsia and also from bleeding. And we've actually developed a low-cost blood pressure monitor, which the Gates have kindly given us funding to pilot in a number of sub-Saharan African countries. And we've actually moved that on now. So we've developed a device, we're piloting the device, and the MRC have just given us £1 million to take that out as a randomised controlled trial. So I'm lucky enough to be part of that as well, alongside my PhD.
So you're gaining a lot of different types of experience in the sort of research environment. Well, Lucy, Natasha, thank you very much for telling us about your CTF project. Thank you. So 2 really good examples where the Biomedical Research Centre provides the research environment, the mentoring and support to allow aspiring young clinical academics to achieve their long-term goals.